Do you know that 30 frames per second are mainly used for live broadcasts, such as news, live sports, or any type of content that takes place in reality? Like most vlogs, 30 frames per second is usually a good choice for vlogs unless you're trying to go ahead and get that cinematic look out of your videos, then you go on 24 frames per second. Even your iPhone, when you try to record a video on your iPhone, you will see that it's always set at 30 frames per second, whereas TV shows and movies are usually shot at 24 frames per second. So in order for me to show you when to use 24, 60, and 120 frames per second, let's go ahead and gather a few shots to see the difference. I'm on my way to the nearest skateboarding park. Let's see if we can get some nice footage out of this day. It's a Saturday, it's 9:30 a.m. I'm not sure if there's gonna be that many people, but if I can find 1 or 2 people to get these shots, that'll be great. Oh, this is great. It's locked, so there's no one here. I'm gonna try to find another skateboarding park that is open. I don't know if it's closed due to COVID, but let's see. Oh, I see people. There's people playing, but I think I have to walk. I think it's open. Let's see. So guess what? I found the park, but look, no one's here. No one's here. Doors open, don't get me wrong. No one likes to go outside anymore or what? Jeez. And we are finally here on our third park. So we are here in Benford Park. I found Wayne. Hey, Wayne.
Hey, how's it going?
What do you do? What are you doing right now?
Throwing some discs for disc golf.
Disc golf, that's how this is.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so we're gonna try to get some 24, 60, and 120 frames per second on disc golf. I also found the skateboarding park over there, but this little girl, so I'm gonna start over here, which is, I think is gonna come out really cool. So let's go ahead and start with 24 frames per second. Go ahead. Nice, okay. Now it's 60 frames per second. Go ahead. Nice. And this is gonna be 120 frames per second. Woo! One more, go ahead. Nice. Okay, that was it. Let me just get this too. Thank you, man.
No problem. Anytime. Oh, sorry, my hands are super
Fist bump, man.
Yeah.
Boom, appreciate it, man. So that was super nice of Wayne to allow me to get a few shots of him doing disc golf. I didn't know that it was called disc golf. I'm sorry for my ignorance. But there's this little girl right here, so now let's see if her dad allows me to get a few shots. Before we keep going, there is this trick that I really want to show you. If you're at a place that you know that you cannot film, or there is a person that doesn't want to be filmed, simply grab your camera like this with your tripod, hit the record button, and then after, just simply rotate the image 180 degrees, and then that's it. Hello. Do you guys mind if I take a few shots of your girl skateboarding? It's for a YouTube channel.
I don't know.
No, that's fine. If you're not okay, you don't feel comfortable, that's fine.
I think maybe not. Thank you.
Thank you, I really appreciate it.
Thank you for asking.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that didn't go as expected. Her dad did not want her daughter to be part of the video. I definitely understand that. Let's go ahead and try to find another skateboard park. Yes, you guessed it right. I'm 2 hours away from home now, and I'm on my 6th park, and I found some skateboarding people, so I'm gonna ask them to see if I can get some nice shots. Let's see. Okay, now that you've seen some examples between 24, 60, and 120 frames per second, let's go ahead and talk what are actually 24 frames per second. So think of this. For every second that passes by, your camera is capturing 24 frames. That means 24 still images are capturing your camera per every second that passes by, converting it to a video. Same with 60 frames per second. For every second that passes by, your camera is capturing 60 still images, which it will convert into video. And the same rule, of course, applies to 120 frames per second. It captures 120 frames per every second that passes by. Let's go ahead and take a look at this specific shot. It was shot at 120 frames per second, but I'm able to slow it down at the specific moment of where I want my shot to be slowed down, which I wouldn't be able to do if it was shot at 24 frames per second. That is why it's always important to plan ahead your shots in order for you to know at what frames per second you will be shooting. Of course I'm gonna be happy. After going to 6 different parks, I was finally able to get somebody to do some skateboarding to show you guys.
If you could just send me those, I'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Fist bump.
Us.
Thank you, boss. Now let me answer some questions that I previously had when I started learning about frames per second. Now, if you have a footage of 24 frames per second and you try to slow it down, it won't look good. Why it won't look good? Because your camera didn't record enough frames in order for you to slow it down. So it's gonna look choppy. I don't know if that's a word. It is a word. And then you're like, well, I'll just shoot everything at 60 frames per second, and then if I need to slow it down, I'll just slow it down. That's what I used to do at the beginning, but then watching at your footage, then you see that it doesn't look as cinematic as you'd like. Plus, the camera movements will look more aggressive rather than 24 frames per second when you're filming. Keep in mind, it always depends on the type of content that you're trying to create. Let's say that you're filming a sports commercial where you want the nice blur movement to show, then shoot at 24 frames per second, which will make it look more natural. If you want less blur movement, then shoot at 60 frames per second because you know that you're able to slow it down a little bit. If you're filming anything that doesn't need to be slowed down, simply choose 24 frames per second. Like this music video that I filmed, everything was shot on 24 frames per second. And this one as well, even though that he was riding a bicycle and there was a lot of movement, I still decided to film it on 24 frames per second. Why, you may ask? Simply because 24 frames per second will give you the best natural movement, that blurred, nice movement, cinematic movement that you always see on movies. If we're filming at 60 frames per second, we can reduce the speed up to 65%. If you try to reduce it more than 65%, you can try 60, but then 50 is gonna start to look not good. That's why you have 120 frames per second, because you can definitely reduce the speed up to 25% in order to have that nice slow motion effect. As you can see over here, when I'm filming myself doing some jumping jacks at 24 frames per second, I'm leaving a lot of blurred movement, which it doesn't look good. Well, it doesn't look good depending on the type of footage that you're trying to acquire. Keep in mind, if you're trying to do something really fast paced, then shoot at 24 frames per second. But right now that I didn't want to show that, I wanted to show more of the movement, I will shoot it at 60 frames per second, and then if I need to slow it down, I'm able to slow it down. At 120 frames per second, it may look similar to 60, but we're able to slow it down up to 25% of speed. That's great. So you're probably asking to yourself right now, hey Manny, this is all good stuff, good examples, but what about the shutter speed? You haven't talked about it. That's a really good question. But I actually want to make a separate video about shutter speed because I actually think it deserves its own place. There are a lot of things to talk about shutter speed depending on the type of footage that you're trying to acquire, but a really good rule of thumb is to follow that 180-degree rule, which is simply setting your shutter speed at double your frame rate. So if you're filming at 24 frames per second, set your shutter speed at 1/48 if your camera allows it, if not 1/50. The same with 60 frames per second. If you're shooting at 60 frames per second, set your shutter speed at 1/20, 1/25 depending on your camera. And the same applies with 120 frames per second to set your shutter speed at 1/250. Now if you're filming a product video, at what frames per second should we record? Well, if we're recording something that requires slow motion, of course go with 120 frames per second so you're able to slow it down and get that nice slow motion of the liquid dropping, and then you get that nice effect that you see in commercials. I still feel like there is more to show when it comes to products and commercials, so let me show you this. So I grabbed some coffee beans just for you to see how it looks on 120 frames per second. And also added some smoke so you see how it looks on slow motion. And over here you see when I'm pouring the coffee, you see all these droplets, and that's set at 120 frames per second at the lowest at 25%. Even over here when I'm dropping this coffee powder in my hand and then blow it over here, you can see all these particles where you wouldn't be able to see if you're filming at 24 frames per second. I gotta clean all these coffee beans. And well, if you learned something today or you found this video somehow helpful, let me know in the comment section your thoughts. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, it really helps the channel. Thank you so much for watching again, guys. Take care.